Join me as we look back at one of my own games, Machinations the Space Princess, how it came about, what it is, what the design goals were, what makes this OSR game of sexy, sleazy, swords and sci-fi tick.
Design. Rewind. Design. Rewind. Rewind. Design.
Fuck me rigid, that was unnecessarily dramatic. Anyway, hello lovelies. Let me take you back, to June of 2013. Machinations the Space Princess comes out. This is my reference copy, black and white interior. But obviously, the year previous had been running up to that. It was, I think, my first crowdfunder campaign, close there too, anyway, before I really understood how much of a pain in the arse they are. There weren't many, if any, OSR space games back then. It was a relatively underserved market, and I kind of wanted to do something OSR-ish, and I kind of wanted to do something sort of 70s grubby, sleazy sci-fi at the time, and these two things kind of came together to create Machinations the Space Princess. I wanted to do something sci-fantasy, which isn't underserved, but, you know, there's different kinds. Star Wars dominates. If you say sci-fantasy, that tends to be what people think of, and that's kind of restrictive and a bit PG rated for my liking. You know, having read or leafed through Metal Hurlant and Heavy Metal magazine, having watched the film, having watched God knows how much 80s and early 90s cheesy straight-to-video sci-fi, I wanted to replicate that kind of thing as well. Additional influence came from some computer games, particularly more irreverent ones. Borderlands 1 and 2 were really good. You might not think that necessarily looking at the later games, though I still managed to enjoy them, but Borderlands 2 was published in 2012, so during the development period of Machinations. It certainly influenced particularly the weapon design rules. Much of my best work is in reaction to something or inspired by something, and I don't think Machinations is any different in that regard. Part of it was that I was reacting in a way to how impressed I was with Jim Radji's Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I mean, duh, obviously. The way Jim went about his work in that book was he personalized it. There were, and are since, many OSR clones. But Lamentations stood out because it was unabashedly what it was, which was Jim's personal take on D&D, right? And it made some bold choices. It chose to show the gore and nastiness and the danger. In the way it was written on a more personal, even conversational sort of basis, you might say, which is my sort of style anyway. And the setting and everything was implicit, and there were no monsters. If you wanted to create monsters or magic items or whatever else, you had to kind of go into it and make it. So that was back to a lot of that, I hesitate to use the term, but punk rock aesthetic and approach that you got in a lot of early role-playing games as a whole. The idea of make your own was very much there, albeit it was more on a fan basis rather than a side hustle basis. So there was that involved, and the OSR was popular, and I didn't start with D&D. I am not particularly interested design-wise in D&D or its derivations. I don't have the nostalgia. So a big part of this was challenging myself to make something based on and around a system that I didn't particularly like. Not to exploit the market, but to test the limitations of my own design chops and what I could come up with. And somewhat annoyingly, this has been one of my most popular games over time. But yeah, as I say, I didn't really grow up with D&D. My first proper RPG after Fighting Fantasy and the Fighting Fantasy Create Your Own book with the were-tiger on the front. My first one was Iron Crown Enterprises Middle-earth role-playing game, MERP, which is a bit in at the deep end, but also very influential on my early gaming career were games like Dragon Warriors, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, things like that. Definitely more of a British influence upon me, and a fairly cosmopolitan smorgasbord of games. So by the time I encountered D&D, my expectations from things like Warhammer and RuneQuest and Dragon Warriors and so on were very different to how my experience panned out when I played D&D, and I didn't enjoy it at all. These days I have a bit more appreciation, but at the time it felt like this hopeless, lumbering, primitive thing. So to design something for what is ostensibly the D&D rules was, yeah, really interesting and engaging challenge for me as a designer. Limitation, while frustrating, can lead to innovation. I was more of a filthy story gamer, though I don't really fall into either camp, which means everyone hates me, which is usual. And I wasn't really into the OSR, but could I make a game within that milieu? And could I take the things that I admired about Lamentations, make them my own, and produce a game in that sort of line? In addition to all that, opportunity struck in the form of Satine Phoenix, who I understand is persona non grata in some quarters still, despite everything. At the time, Satine was making her exit from the adult industry, and she was doing some really cool art stuff online, though she's embarrassed by the art she did for this now, though I don't think she should be. And so she did the vast and overwhelming majority of the art for the book for me, and it just, yeah, that was an opportunity to help her out, which helped launch her RPG career. I think she said as much on our recent interview anyway. So I'm proud that I was able to help her out. She was able to help me out, and I couldn't think of anyone more appropriate to work on something like Machinations. So sometimes the cosmos just kind of aligns in a way and opportunity knocks, and you have the chance to grasp onto that opportunity with both hands. No lewdness intended. So Satine helped define the style and the visuals, and I do really like the cover and the other one that she did that was intended for a companion that unfortunately never came out, because I can't stick to anything. I'm always on to the next idea, which is part of the reason I've hived off Machinations to Machinations Media, who are going to be producing stuff for MOTSP, Machinations of the Space Princess, and that's part of the reason I've chosen to look at that at this one for this video. So go and check out motsp.com. The zine is coming there. I have minimal input on that, but I do have oversight over everything that they're doing, so definitely go and have a look at that. Look at the new stuff that's there and the new stuff that's coming. When it came to the actual design of the game, there are a few key changes I wanted to make, because part of the appeal of writing for the OSR is that it's everyone's house rules, basically, and there were things that made D&D and D&D adjacent or derived games deeply unsatisfying for me, things that pissed me off, and those felt like things that I could address in a book like MOTSP. Things like how boring it is to play a fighter because you have perhaps a very limited set of maneuvers that you can engage in, and they probably won't work, and mostly every turn is I hit it with my axe, I hit it with my axe, I hit it with my axe. Boring. So I incorporated open rules for stunts, which I've since used in anything D20 adjacent that I use. You want to do something cool? Fine, do it, but roll at a -5 disadvantage. This works particularly well in games where there is a fairly severe disjunct between the base attack bonus of a fighter type and everyone else, because then that protects the fighter's niche. Not only are they more likely to hit and to reliably do damage, but they can also pull off some of these crazy maneuvers and things, albeit at a penalty, which others can't. So that is a rule that I have transferred to every OSR or D20 adjacent sort of game that I play. A key important thing with Machinations is the race rules. I guess species rules, sophons, they're mostly called throughout the book. There are a handful of set races that are mostly meant to be examples. Humans, Erlanth, who are the blue-skinned former Imperials, and a couple of other things. But the idea is meant to be that you make your own alien race, because most alien races in most games are pretty boring. And as someone who, came up reading Lensman, which has some truly alien creatures in it, frustrated by Star Trek's majority of people with funny noses as aliens sort of thing, I wanted to encourage people to play some of the weirder, less humanoid races and things that I had seen in media. So when it comes to creating your character's species is as important as anything else here. So I created a huge list of potential species traits. Then I listed them alphabetically elsewhere in the book, but I also listed them by type. So you want to play someone frog-like, here are the traits that would suit that. Swimming, water breathing. If you wanted to play an insectoid species, then you might want chitinous armor, extra actions to represent your extra limbs, the ability to phas, which is taken from Null Crystal Tears, the Thranx books. You can sense movement that disturbs the atmosphere out at 10 meters in all directions. Maybe you can have insect wings so you can fly, and most insects have ultraviolet vision so you can see things that others can't see, and so on. Of course, you can mix and match all of these, and so as a result you can create just about anything. But the less humanoid you are, the less able you are to interact with other species. It's a sop towards balance, I suppose, though mostly I don't care about balance in this game or any other particularly. But that way you end up with a cornucopia of different alien species in your game, people creating background and worlds and species and traditions as they go, and that is something that is the kind of the unique selling point for Machinations. You don't have rigidly defined alien species, you create them for your character. Saves as well. I've never liked original D&D type saves, right? Save versus death. Poison makes sense perhaps, but then it was completely unrelated to, almost completely unrelated to statistics and so on until later editions, and trying to figure out what saving throw someone makes is annoying because it's not explicit. So I changed those rules as well, and I made saves tied directly to statistics. Half your statistic is your save. I also use the saves in conjunction with the skill system, which is roll a d6 equal to or under your skill, same as Lamentations, But then you also additionally get the chance to recover or even succeed even if you fail by rolling your save, by rolling under your save. So the idea there is that there are a lot of things that people are capable of doing anyway, and requiring the skill or only allowing a 1 in 6 chance to succeed, at least to start with, is not a great way to approach those things, especially for the career types that have less skill points. So this opens it up and allows you to. So say you're picking a electronic lock, right? And you've got a skill of 2. All right, let's chance my arm. Oh no, I rolled a 4. That's a mistake. Okay, then I might get to make a logic save to recover from this mistake and not set off the alarm, at least, or if it's a simple lock that anyone could potentially pick to get through. So let's say I have intelligence of 12, so I have a logic save of 6. Roll, no, 18, failure. The alarms go off, the lock does not open. See, it gives you some of the oomph that gradated success levels can have, but without too much, and it allows you to create edge case situations where you're hanging on by your fingertips, or you manage to stop the alarm going off but you've screwed the lock up, all of that kind of thing. I reduced the amount of hit points because I want things to be deadly, but I also made people easier to hit in most circumstances, and I made armor reduce damage rather than deflecting shots. So this is all stuff that I prefer when it comes to games like this. You've seen similar ideas in things like Morkborg and so on. I created some half-decent vehicle and spaceship rules, which are always lacking in almost always lacking in D&D and D&D derivatives. I kept the magic, which is psionic powers, actually somewhat familiar, because that seems to be one of the sacred cows that people are really attached to with OSR stuff, but using psionic points and calling it psionic powers. When we do a revised edition, that's probably going to be the most major change, with other things just being expanded and clarified and so on. But I would rather see a more science fiction-y approach to psionic powers and so on. When it comes to creatures, we have a few examples, unlike Lamentations, but we have rules that are taken or influenced from Feng Shui and even 4th edition D&D. I know in that baddies come in the form of cannon fodder, goons, and bosses, each with a gradation in difficulty. So goons take penalties to various stats, minimum hit points, but you barely get any XP for defeating them. But that allows your heroes to gun down hordes of guards or enemies or whatever else. Goons are more regular, so they're treated more like normal monsters, and then bosses are extra tough, maximal hit points, few other bonuses, and so on. Each of those is kind of a template, so if you like, you can create a trooper or something as a goon and count those as the officers. You can apply the template to create them as cannon fodder, and you can apply another template to make them as bosses. So you have captain, corporals, troops. Easy. Is Machinations a perfect game? No, nothing is perfect, but it addresses the issues that I've always had with D&D light and OSR type games, and it's been pretty successful for me for something I really did mostly as a sort of personal challenge. Could I do this? But it does well. It's great. I think people seem to like it. That's the most important thing. And it seems to have legs on its own. It's just my scattershot approach to game design takes me onto the next project without much support for whatever it is that I've put out. So hopefully with Machinations Media, MOTSP.com, doing stuff for Machinations, it can continue to have a long and somewhat influential life. Zang.
Machinations of the Space Princess is an old-school RPG with a sci-fi setting. The rules are familiar and at once innovative. Opened up so you can play literally any alien species you can envision. Purchase it at RPG Now or Lulu.com.